Chapter 1. The Scent of Death. Hercule Poirot sat in the morning sun, sipping a small cup of espresso in the conservatory of his London flat. The air was fragrant with the delicate perfume of fresh-cut roses from the nearby florist, mingled with the sharp tang of polish that had just been applied to the floor by his meticulous valet George. All was as he liked it, in perfect order, until the telephone rang. Poirot speaking, he answered crisply, setting the cup down with a soft clink. "Hercule, it's Japp. I need you," came the voice of Chief Inspector James Japp, clipped and urgent. "We've got a murder in Kensington, society type. The name's Odette Charpentier." "Ah," Poirot said softly, the name vaguely familiar. "Odette Charpentier, the perfumer? That's her. Found dead in her boutique early this morning, locked from the inside, no sign of a break-in." Poirot's eyebrows rose ever so slightly. "Très intéressant. I shall be there in 30 minutes." Madame Charpentier's boutique, Maison Charpentier, was nestled discreetly among the high-end shops of Kensington's most elegant street. It was the sort of place where every scent was a secret, and every bottle a masterpiece. As Poirot arrived, the door was flanked by a pair of constables, and a small crowd had gathered, whispering behind gloved hands. Inside, the air was heavy with perfume, rich, heady, almost suffocating. Beneath the scent lingered something darker, the unmistakable metallic tang of blood. Japp met him at the entrance to the boutique's private studio. She was found in here by her assistant, Vivienne Dubois, around 7 this morning. Poor girl's beside herself. Poirot entered the room and stood still, letting his eyes and nose work. The space was lined with gleaming glass shelves, each holding exquisite bottles in every shape and shade. On the ornate rug lay Odette Charpentier. Her elegant body collapsed against the foot of an antique chaise. Her black dress was immaculate, save for the dark stain at her side. Poirot knelt beside her, careful not to disturb the scene. Her expression was one of surprise more than fear. He leaned in, his nostrils flaring slightly. Japp raised an eyebrow. "Smells like a perfume factory. Exploded in here. Mais oui, mon ami. But do you detect the note beneath the symphony? Something bitter, sharp. Not part of her usual collection, I would wager." Poirot stirred and began to examine the room. On a side table stood a single bottle, distinct from the others. Plain, utilitarian, with a handwritten label. No. 31. Experimental. He uncorked it gently and sniffed. His eyes narrowed. "This is not her creation," he murmured. "It is crude, rushed, and more importantly, it is missing the finesse that Madame Charpentier was renowned for." Japp frowned. "You're saying someone else made it?" "No. I am saying someone wanted us to think that." The assistant, Vivienne Dubois, sat trembling in the upstairs office. She was a slight young woman with pale skin and hair drawn back in a severe bun. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "She was like a mother to me," Vivienne said, voice wavering. I opened the shop at 7 like always. The door to the lab was locked, so I knocked. No answer. I used the spare key. And then I saw her. Did she have any enemies?" Poirot asked gently. Vivienne shook her head. "Everyone adored her. Clients, collaborators, even her rivals in the industry respected her. She was supposed to launch a new line next month, Parfum de Minuit. It was meant to revolutionize the market. Poirot exchanged a glance with Jap. Who else had access to the lab? Just me and Madame, Vivian whispered. And Mr. Lemaire. He was her business partner, but he left last week for Paris on business. Poirot made a mental note. Did she receive any unusual visitors recently? Vivian hesitated. Well, there was a man yesterday. He came just before closing. He had an appointment, but he didn't give a name. Tall, dark coat, gloves. I remember because Madame seemed tense after he left. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And did you overhear their conversation? No, she said. The door was closed, but when he left, Madame asked me to lock the lab for the night. She said she had work to finish alone. Later that day, Poirot and Jap returned to the OEO boutique with a forensics team. While they worked, Poirot wandered back into the lab, his eyes darting to the rows of bottles. Then he sorted. One of the bottles had a smudge on its otherwise pristine surface. Poirot carefully picked it up with gloves. It was number 31 again. He turned to Jap. There is something curious about this bottle. It was moved after Madame died. How can you tell? Jap asked. Poirot pointed. There is blood spatter on the wall behind where it stood. Yet the bottle has no trace on its back. Someone returned it to the shelf after the murder. Jap whistled. Covering their tracks. Poirot nodded. Or leaving a message. That evening, Poirot returned to his flat, mind buzzing with theories. He opened his little black notebook and jotted down names. Odette Charpentier. Victim, Vivian Dubois. Assistant, Mr. Lemaire. Business partner, in Paris. Unknown visitor, tall, gloves, seen last night. Then he added 2 more lines. Locked room, how, and no. 31, foreign scent, deliberate placement. Suddenly, a memory stirred. He went to his shelf and pulled down a slim, dusty volume. The Art of Scent Construction, by Jean Renaud. Flipping through, he stopped at a section on mimicry scents, perfumes designed to replicate other smells, including toxic compounds. One entry caught his eye. Compound Tobacco 31, based on bitter almonds, on bitter, used historically in both perfumery and poison. Highly unstable. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. It is not a scent. It is a message. The next morning brought another surprise. A letter arrived at Poirot's door. No return address, written on thick cream paper, scented faintly with jasmine. Inside, a single line. Not everything beautiful is benign. Below it, a pressed flower. Jasmine. Poirot smiled grimly. The game had begun. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Bottle. The morning after Odette Charpentier's murder dawned crisp and grey. A thin mist curling along the Thames like a whispered secret. Poirot sat at his breakfast table, slowly peeling a boiled egg with the precision of a surgeon. His mind, however, was already elsewhere, on the strange message he had received the night before. Not everything beautiful is benign. The jasmine-scented paper, the pressed flower, the mysterious perfume labeled number 31. Each clue as fragrant and layered as the perfumes Madame Charpentier had so meticulously crafted. George, he called gently. Yes, sir. Have the jasmine petals from the letter placed in a glassine envelope. Also, find out if any florists in the Chelsea or Kensington area deal in pressed flowers. Jasmine in particular. Right away, sir. Poirot dabbed at his mouth with a napkin and stood. And telephone Inspector Japp. Tell him I wish to meet at the boutique. I have a suspicion, and it is time to test it. The boutique was still closed to the public, cordoned off with Scotland Yard's tape. Inside, the lab remained untouched, save for the path the investigators had tread. Poirot moved to the display shelves and began examining the rows of bottles, each a work of art, a shimmering pink flacon shaped like a rose, a smoky gray one like a raindrop. But his eyes settled once again on the plain bottle labeled number 31, experimental. He turned to Japp, who was scribbling in his notebook nearby. You had the toxicology report prepared? Japp nodded. Came in this morning. There were traces of bitter almond compound in the victim's bloodstream. Cyanide derivative, they think. Ah! Poirot exclaimed, eyes sparkling. As I suspected. The scent in the room was not merely cosmetic. It was the weapon. Japp frowned. So she was poisoned through inhalation. Possibly. But also, perhaps, a misdirection. Poirot gently removed the stopper from the number 31 bottle and sniffed once more. You see, mon ami, cyanide has a very distinct scent. Bitter almonds. But not everyone can detect it. Only about 1 in 3 people have the genetic ability. Japp looked baffled. So, what does that mean? It means our killer was either very clever or very lucky. As Poirot and Japp examined the rest of the studio, a timid knock came from their door. It was Vivienne Dubois. I left something in Madame's drawer, she said softly. A locket. May I? Poirot exchanged a glance with Japp and nodded. Of course, mademoiselle. We shall accompany you. Vivienne walked to the antique vanity at the back of the lab and gently opened the drawer. She removed a small silver locket with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph of herself and Madame Charpentier. She was the only family I had left, she murmured. She found me working in a tea shop, you know. Said I had a nose for things. Poirot studied her. And had you seen the bottle marked number 31 before? Vivienne hesitated. No, at least, not on the shelf. Madame sometimes tested unusual combinations, but she never labeled anything with numbers. Always names, poetic ones. It was her signature. Or, useful detail, Poirot said softly. Merci, mademoiselle. That afternoon, Poirot paid a visit to the Royal Society of Perfumers, a quiet institution housed in a stately brick building off Regent Street. The receptionist, a brisk woman with horn-rimmed glasses, led him to the archive room where records of registered perfumes were kept. Numbered formulas, she said, are usually reserved for experiments or patent applications. They're not meant for public release. Poirot tapped a gloved finger on the ledger. Do you happen to know if Madame Charpentier had any formula labeled number 31? The woman squinted at a catalogue. Ah, here. Formula 31, dated 5 years ago, submitted under the name of Alain Lemaire. Lemaire, not Charpentier. Yes, though the address on file is the same as the boutique's. That's unusual. Poirot's mustache twitched. Indeed. Back at his flat, Poirot considered this new revelation. Alain Lemaire, Odette's business partner, had once created a formula called number 31. And now, years later, that same scent had returned, deadly, and at the scene of her murder. He picked up the phone and dialed. Customs office, please. Yes, I'm inquiring about a man named Alain Lemaire, French citizen. Travel records to and from Paris in the last week. Poirot listened, eyebrows rising. Ah, so he never left London. Later that evening, Poirot and Japp visited Lemaire's flat, a tasteful affair in Mayfair, with modernist decor and a view of the park. The man who opened the door was tall, impeccably dressed, and had a disarming smile. "Monsieur Lemaire," Poirot said smoothly. "May we come in?" Lemaire nodded graciously. "Of course, anything I can do to assist." The apartment smelled faintly of sandalwood and vetiver. Poirot walked slowly through the sitting room, noting the wall of books, the glass cabinet of rare colognes, the faint scuff on the floor leading toward the study. "We understand you were in Paris last week," Japp said. Lemaire hesitated. "That was the plan, yes, but the meeting was postponed. I stayed in town." "And you did not inform anyone?" Poirot asked. Lemaire shrugged. There was no need. Poirot turned to face him. "Then you will forgive us if we ask for your alibi for the night of Madame Charpentier's death?" "I was at home," Lemaire replied smoothly. "Alone." "A pity," Poirot murmured. "Do you suspect me?" "We suspect everyone," Japp said grimly. Before they left, Poirot paused at the door. "One final question, monsieur. Why did you file a patent for a formula Madame Charpentier created?" Lemaire's mask cracked ever so slightly. "I don't know what you mean," Poirot smiled. "Ah, then we shall let the evidence speak." That night, Poirot sat at his desk and reviewed everything. And then he saw it. A detail so small, he had overlooked it. He reached for the perfume bottle Vivian had worn on her first day of questioning. A soft, floral note. Jasmine? He checked the envelope from the anonymous letter. Same scent. Poirot rose suddenly. "George," he called, "fetch me the visitor logs for Maison Charpentier for the past month. I believe Mademoiselle Vivienne may have more secrets than she admits." As the city drifted into a quiet midnight, Poirot sat in his armchair, the bottle of number 31 in one hand, the jasmine-scented note in the other. He knew now that this case was not merely a matter of business rivalry or jealousy. It was personal, and someone, perhaps more than one person, had a motive soaked not just in profit or betrayal, but in obsession. The scent of death lingered. But Poirot was closing in. Chapter 3. The Assistant's Alibi. The following morning brought with it a curious blend of anticipation and unease. Hercule Poirot, ever the embodiment of order and routine, had forgone his usual leisurely breakfast. Instead, he stood at his writing desk, poring over the visitor logs from Maison Charpentier, which George had fetched from the boutique's archives. For most people, it would be an unremarkable list. Clients, couriers, salesmen. But to Poirot, every entry was a breadcrumb in a trail of deception. He tapped a particular line with his finger. March 30th, Monsieur Armand Dufour, supplier, meeting with Mademoiselle Dubois, and 16:45. "Curious," he murmured. Armand Dufour was a known supplier of rare perfume oils and a close contact of Madame Charpentier. Yet his meetings had always been with Odette herself. So why had Vivian been seeing him? And even more intriguing, Vivian had never mentioned this meeting. Vivian had never mentioned this meeting. By noon, Poirot was once again standing in the boutique, now shrouded in silence and mourning. The constables had left, but the air still held the memory of the tragedy. Vivienne emerged from the back room, pale but collected, her hands clasped tightly. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began gently, "may I ask you again about the evening before Madame's death?" She nodded. "Of course. You said she stayed late, working, and you locked the lab after she finished." "Yes." Poirot tilted his head. "Are you certain of the time you left?" "Shortly after 6. And what did you do after?" Vivienne hesitated. "I went home. I live in Bayswater. Took the tube." Poirot gave a slight smile. "That is not what Monsieur Dufour recalls." Her expression froze. "You met with him that afternoon, did you not?" "At 4:45, here, in the boutique," she faltered. Yes, I did." "Why hide it?" Vivienne looked down. "Because Madame didn't know. I arranged the meeting in secret. I wanted to develop my own line." Jap, who had just entered, raised an eyebrow. "You were planning to break out on your own?" "I was going to ask her for her blessing," Vivienne said quickly. "I hadn't told her yet. I didn't want to hurt her." Poirot's voice was soft, but his gaze was sharp. "And yet, the scent you wore 2 days ago, it was not a fragrance from Maison Charpentier, was it?" "No," she admitted, "was mine. One I made, inspired by jasmine." Poirot nodded slowly. "As was the scent on the letter I received. A coincidence?" Vivienne's lips parted, but no words came out. "You see, mademoiselle," Poirot continued, "it seems more and more likely that this crime has roots deeper than jealousy or rivalry. I believe there was betrayal. Deep, personal betrayal." Vivienne stood silent. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "I didn't kill her." Poirot studied her for a long moment. "Then help us find who did." Outside the boutique, Jap exhaled heavily. "She's hiding something." "Oui," Poirot agreed. "But perhaps not guilt. Perhaps fear." Jap frowned. "You think someone threatened her?" Poirot shook his head. "I think someone used her." He pulled from his coat pocket a small note, an order form retrieved from the storeroom. It bore Vivienne's signature, but had been altered. "Look here, mon ami. This order form, it's for a batch of methyl benzoate, a compound used in both perfumes and poisons. The order was placed a week ago. But look at the handwriting." Jap peered closely. "Different pen, different hand." "Exactly," Poirot said. "It was forged, but placed under Vivienne's name." That evening, Poirot arranged a discreet meeting with Armand Dufour at a modest cafe near Charing Cross. The man arrived dressed in a rumpled brown suit, smelling faintly of cedar and cardamom. "Monsieur Dufour," Poirot began, "tell me about your last meeting with Mademoiselle Dubois." Dufour nodded. "She wanted to source jasmine oil. High quality. Told me she was working on something new. Nervous about it. Said she had to do it behind Odette's back." "Did she mention anyone else involved?" Dufour hesitated. "She didn't say a name, but she said she wasn't alone in this venture. Someone who had promised to help her launch." Poirot leaned forward. "Someone from the boutique?" Dufour shrugged. "She didn't say. Only that she felt torn. Guilty." Poirot filed that away. "Merci, monsieur." As Dufour rose to leave, Poirot called after him, "Did she ever mention No. 31? Dufour paused. "No, but she said something odd." that her partner called her work the key to unlocking the bottle. I didn't understand it at the time. Poirot smiled faintly. Nor do I. Not yet. Back home, Poirot sat in his armchair with a small glass of crème de cassis. The phrase echoed in his mind, the key to unlocking the bottle. He walked to the mantel where he had placed the mysterious number 31 bottle. He stared at it, then uncorked it once again. The bitter almond scent had begun to fade, but a faint undercurrent remained. He sniffed it again, slower this time. There, beneath the almond, a delicate thread of something else. Jasmine. He blinked. 31 was not just a poison, it was a hybrid scent. A blend. Someone had added Vivian's experimental scent to the compound. A chemical fingerprint. Vivian hadn't made the poison. She'd been used as a contributor, perhaps unknowingly, but that meant the true killer had access to both formulas. Someone with reach. Someone who knew both the old and new compositions. The next day, Poirot returned to the Royal Society of Perfumers. The archivist greeted him politely. I wish to see any recently modified patents related to Alain Lemaire, he said. She retrieved the logbook, flipping pages. Ah, a new submission? Just last week. Filed under Lemaire Innovations, but the scent registered as Parfum de Minuit. Poirot's eyes flashed. That had been Odette's new line. He leaned closer. And the signature? The woman hesitated. Strange. It's signed Au Charpentier, but with a notation in Lemaire's handwriting. May I photograph it? With a reluctant nod, she allowed it. Poirot left the building with a grim expression. In his hand was the proof he needed. That night, Japp and Poirot visited Lemaire again. This time, there was no pretense of civility. You submitted Parfum de Minuit under your own name, Japp growled. You forged her signature. Lemaire's calm demeanor cracked. She would have destroyed it. It was too bold for her, too revolutionary. She wanted to delay it. I couldn't let her waste it. Poirot stepped forward. So you took it. And when she confronted you, Lemaire's fists clenched. She was going to cut me out. After everything we built, she threatened to report me. And so you killed her? Poirot said softly. No, I just wanted to scare her. I used the scent, but I didn't know how much was needed. I thought you could control it, Poirot said, voice like ice. But scent, monsieur, like truth, is difficult to contain. Japp cuffed him. You're done. As Lemaire was led away, Poirot looked down at the empty bottle of number 31 on the table. It was no longer just a bottle. It was a tomb. Chapter 4. The Scent of Deceit. With Alain Lemaire in custody, the case might have seemed closed to an outsider. The motive, a stolen formula. The means, a laced perfume. And the opportunity. He had forged documents, lied about his whereabouts, and had both the skill and access to carry it out. A near-perfect crime. Yet, Hercule Poirot was not satisfied. It is too neat, he said, folding his arms as he stood before the fireplace at Whitehaven Mansions. Like a tailored suit, pressed, clean, but concealing a stain beneath the lining. George, who was dusting the mantel, glanced up. Sir? Poirot tapped a finger to his chin. Lemaire's confession, it lacks one thing. Regret? No, Poirot said. Logic. He turned and picked up the bottle of number 31. Why go through such a convoluted method if one wished simply to murder Odette Charpentier? Why leave a signature sent, so easily traced? It was a message, a statement. And Lemaire, for all his arrogance, is not a man who leaves fingerprints on his crimes. He paused, which means someone else may have pushed him, or set the stage altogether. Poirot's thoughts returned to Vivian. She had claimed innocence, and evidence had partially supported that claim. But she was still entangled in the affair more deeply than she admitted. And now, with Lemaire gone, she stood to inherit something more valuable than any patent legacy. He found her the next morning in Madame Charpentier's former office. The boutique had reopened, though it was quieter than usual. Vivienne looked up from a sheaf of papers, startled but not unfriendly. "Monsieur Poirot." "Mademoiselle," he said warmly. "How fares the boutique?" She gave a small, distracted smile. "It's strange, being here without her. I keep expecting to hear her humming from the lab." Poirot sat across from her. "And now you lead the atelier?" "I suppose so," she said. "For now. There are decisions to be made." Poirot gestured to the papers. "Inheritance?" Vivienne nodded. "Odette named me as the primary successor. The will was read yesterday." "Generous," Poirot murmured. "And was Monsieur Lemaire aware of this arrangement?" Her face grew pale. "I don't know." "But you didn't mention this when I first asked your connection to her." "I didn't think it mattered," she said defensively. "I never wanted her money, or the boutique. I loved her." Poirot studied her carefully. "Then tell me again, who else knew about your fragrance experiments, aside from Dufour and perhaps Lemaire?" Vivienne hesitated, then looked down. There was one more. A client, regular. Odette trusted her, and so did I. "Who?" "Lady Iris Pembroke." Lady Iris Pembroke was not easy to reach. When Poirot requested an interview, her butler informed him she was traveling. Cornwall, he believed, but had left no forwarding address. That in itself struck Poirot as suspicious. "Discreet, wealthy, and recently vanished," he muttered, as he paced Japp's office later that day. "That never bodes well." Japp leaned back in his chair, scanning the file Poirot had assembled. "Pembroke, eh? I know the name, big in art circles, donated to that gallery off Piccadilly. You think she's tied to this?" "I think she was close to Odette. Too close. Possibly close enough to feel betrayed. Or possessive." He picked up the last letter Odette had ever written, unsent and found in her desk. "I cannot allow you to use what was never truly yours. This scent, this identity, it was born of my soul. I created it for myself, not for you." It was unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Japp frowned. "You think this was to the Pembroke woman?" "I do, and I believe Parfum de Minuit was inspired not just by art, but by obsession." Poirot returned to the boutique that evening, long after the last customer had gone. The gas lamps flickered through the windows, casting long shadows against the display shelves. Vivian was still there, cataloging inventory. She looked up as he entered. "You're working late again," he observed. "There's always something to do," she said with a tired smile. Poirot nodded toward a cabinet behind her. "Might I see the drafts of your own fragrances? I believe they may help clear a lingering doubt." She hesitated. Of course. Inside were several small vials, each labeled with a coded number and a poetic name. Whispered Veil, Nocturne Petal, L'Inconnu. Poirot uncorked one and sniffed carefully. Jasmine, bergamot, and sandalwood. Vivienne looked surprised. Yes, how did you? Poirot smiled. Mon name is legendary, mademoiselle, and it tells me something quite important. He held up the vial labeled L'Inconnu. This was the base for number 31, was it not? Vivienne nodded slowly. Yes, but I didn't give it to Le Maire, I swear. No, Poirot said, but someone else did. He turned toward the lab, stepping in with delicate care. Then he spotted it. A second set of gloves. Not Le Maire's size. Small ivory silk. Expensive. Not from the lab's standard issue. He took the map gently. Inside the right-hand glove was a small label. Pembroke House. It took Poirot another day to finally locate Lady Iris. She was not in Cornwall, as her butler had said. She was in Florence, staying at a palazzo overlooking the Arno. He made arrangements immediately. The next morning, Poirot stirred in the sun-drenched salon of the Palazzo Bellini, where Lady Iris sipped espresso from delicate porcelain and regarded him with cool amusement. "I don't believe we've been introduced," she said, her voice honeyed with an aristocratic drawl. Poirot bowed. "I am Hercule Poirot. I am investigating the death of Madame Odette Charpentier." Something flickered behind Iris's eyes. "A dreadful thing. I heard about it while traveling. Odette and I were acquaintances. Close ones, I believe. You visited her often." "I was a patron," she replied smoothly. Poirot sat. "Then you will not mind if I ask about your fragrance preferences. Did you ever wear parfum de minuit?" Lady Iris's mask slipped just slightly. "It was a custom scent," she admitted. "Odette created it with me in mind, but she refused to release it because she felt it was too personal. She said it was hers." Iris laughed softly. "But it wasn't. It was ours. I inspired it." She admitted as much. Poirot's voice dropped. "What, and so when she denied you, when she refused to make it public, you took matters into your own hands?" "I did nothing of the sort," she said sharply. Poirot withdrew a photograph from his pocket of the gloves. "These were found in the lab. Yours, are they not?" Iris said nothing. "And the compound you used was mixed, using Mademoiselle Dubois' base? You knew of her work. You stole it." "I wanted her to release the scent," Iris cried, suddenly trembling. "I thought, if I could scare her, show how someone else could make it public first. I didn't want to kill her." "But you did," Poirot said gently. "Your obsession, your need to claim her genius, it poisoned more than perfume." 3 weeks later, the papers would tell the world of the arrest of Lady Iris Pembroke, socialite, art patron, and would-be perfumer. The official story would be complex, but Poirot's conclusion was simple. 2 people had sought to claim what Odette Charpentier had created. One for profit, one for love, twisted into control. And both had lost her forever. As Poirot walked past the boutique one last time, the display window had changed. In the center stood a single bottle. No name, no label, just a pale luminous liquid, and a tag that read, "In memory of the scent too beautiful to be owned." Poirot tipped his hat. She was a true artist, he said softly. Chapter 5. Shadows Beneath the Surface. The arrest of Lady Iris Pembroke had sent tremors through London's high society. Whispers moved faster than perfume through silk. Gossip hung in the air, like fog in Covent Garden. A noblewoman accused of murder, by means of a perfume bottle. It was almost too theatrical to be believed. But Hercule Poirot, content that justice had been done, did not rest. For beneath the smooth surface of a closed case, a ripple remained. Back in his flat, Poirot reviewed his notes. A timeline here, a chemical analysis there. Something did not fit. Not entirely. Lady Iris had confessed to stealing the formula and pressuring Odette, but she denied administering the fatal dose. She said it was only to scare her. Poirot murmured to himself, she never meant to kill. Of course, many criminals said the same, but Poirot trusted in what was, not what people said. The dosage used had been far more than a scare tactic. It had been intentional, measured with the precision of a chemist, not a dilettante. Lady Iris may have been complicit, but someone else may have executed the final act. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. George opened it, revealing a slightly disheveled Inspector Japp, hat in hand, face tight with concern. "You'd better come with me, Poirot." Poirot rose. "Mon ami, what has happened?" "We found something," Japp said grimly. "Something you'll want to see." At Scotland Yard, Japp led Poirot into a quiet, secure room. On the table sat a burnt ledger, half destroyed but partially legible. "Recovered it from Lemaire's flat," Japp explained. "Turns out he kept some rather interesting records." Poirot lifted the brittle edges carefully, scanning the pages. Chemical orders, suppliers, payments, and, he tapped a name. Dufour. Vivian's assistant. The one who seemed almost invisible in the chaos. Reliable, quiet, harmless. Lemaire was paying him regularly, Poirot observed. Japp nodded. "We think Dufour may have been selling formulas, possibly even making small batches on the side." Poirot frowned. But then, was it he who made the final batch of number 31? "We don't know yet, but we've brought him in for questioning." Dufour sat across the table, his hands folded tightly. Gone was the meek lab assistant. His eyes were alert now, watching every move. Poirot leaned forward. "Monsieur Dufour, let us speak plainly. You were being paid by Lemaire to provide chemical samples and research, were you not?" A pause. "Yes." "And you did so willingly?" Another pause. "I needed the money." Poirot nodded. "And did you make the final batch of number 31? "No," Dufour said quickly. "I swear. I gave him the base components, yes. But I never mixed anything for use. That's not what I agreed to." "But someone did." Dufour hesitated. He said he'd found someone else who could finish it, someone who knew Odette's proportions better than I did. Poirot felt the cold slide of realization. Someone intimate with the signature scent. He stood. "Merci, Monsieur Dufour. You have been most enlightening." That evening, Poirot paid another visit to the boutique. Vivian answered the door herself, looking worn but resolute. "Monsieur Poirot, another question?" "Oui," he said softly, "but not one you can answer with words." He walked past her into the lab, where the equipment still lay precisely as Odette had arranged it. The light was golden through the windows. Dust danced in the shafts like snowflakes. Poirot turned slowly. "You told me once that Odette was like a second mother to you." Vivian nodded. "She was. But she wasn't perfect, was she?" Vivian's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "She held power, influence, even over you." Poirot stepped closer. "Tell me, mademoiselle, who first suggested the combination that became number 31? Vivian looked confused. "Odette, no. It was you, was it not?" Vivian opened her mouth, then closed it. "Yes," she said quietly. "It was my idea. But she developed it, refined it. She claimed it." Vivian's voice turned bitter. "She always did that. Took credit. She said I was too young to understand what success meant, that it would damage me if I rose too fast." Poirot stared into her eyes. "But you wanted more." Tears welled there. "I loved her, but I was tired of being in her shadow." Poirot said nothing, and then Vivienne sat down heavily. "She didn't deserve to die," she whispered. "I didn't want that. But I did want her to see that I was just as talented, just as capable." Poirot nodded solemnly. "And so you let Lemaire finish what he started?" She looked away. "He was going to ruin her. I thought if I controlled the batch, just one dose, it could scare her, make her see the truth. But she used it on herself. I didn't know she would." Poirot raised a hand. "It is done, mademoiselle. The bottle has been uncorked, and the truth, it cannot be resealed." The next morning, Vivienne Dubois turned herself in. Poirot said little, as Japp processed the paperwork. Outside, the fog rolled low, across the Thames. "She didn't mean to kill her," Japp said. Poirot shook his head. "Intent is the slipperiest of things. But action, mon ami, that leaves a footprint. And now the boutique." Poirot turned to the window. "It may survive, but only if it is reborn." Weeks passed. In the quiet aftermath, Poirot received a parcel. No sender. Inside was a bottle. L'Inconnu, the last scent Vivienne had created. On the tag in her delicate script were the words, "To the man who saw beyond the fragrance." Poirot held it up to the light, smiled faintly, and set it beside his clock. Some mysteries were bottled, others lingered in the air long after the case had closed. Chapter 6. Echoes in amber London had begun to settle again, its rhythms returning to normal, and at least on the surface, the scandal of the perfume murder had faded from the headlines, replaced by more fashionable gossip. Society moved quickly, but Hercule Poirot did not. There was a fragrance still lingering in his mind, a note left unresolved. Vivienne Dubois had confessed to her part in Odette Charpentier's death, and yet, there is something unsaid, Poirot told himself, staring at the sealed envelope on his desk. It had arrived that morning, no return address, only his name in confident ink. Inside was a single object, a sliver of amber glass, and a phrase scribbled on a torn sheet of paper. "You missed something. We all did." Poirot examined the glass. It was smooth on one side, jagged on the other. The scent of bergamot clung to it faintly, just enough to make his nose twitch. It had once been part of a perfume bottle. But not the number 31 bottle, recovered from the crime scene. This one was different, older, and familiar. Poirot turned to his files, one photograph in particular. Odette standing beside her safe, hand resting lightly on a display of archival creations. Formulas never released, locked away behind glass. Among them had been an amber bottle with a gilded stopper. Poirot remembered asking about it once, and Odette had said, almost wistfully, "That scent is a secret I'll take to my grave." Now it appeared someone had tried to pry it loose. He paid another visit to the boutique, now shuttered for renovations. The windows were draped, but the door still accepted his knock. Inside, the ever-faithful Marcel greeted him. "Monsieur Poirot," the manager said, "I wasn't expecting you." Neither was Odette, Poirot said quietly. When her secrets began to unravel, Marcel blinked startled. "I need access to the back safe," Poirot continued, "where Odette kept her private formulas." Marcel hesitated. The executor sealed it, but, "I suppose with what's happened, you have more right than most," unlocked the heavy door. Inside was the small vault, undisturbed. Poirot stepped in slowly, letting his gaze move across the shelves. Some bottles had been removed, Vivien's perhaps, but many remained. And then he saw it, a gap. Where the amber bottle had once stood, there was now only a faint dust ring, and the impression of velvet padding. "Someone came here," Poirot whispered. "After her death, they took something back." He turned to Marcel. "Was there a second key to this vault?" "No," the man said. "Only Odette had one. And after her death, it was collected by the solicitors." Poirot frowned. Then, the lock was picked. Someone with skill and time. He eyed the ventilation grate near the floor. Someone small. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot reviewed the names once more. Vivienne, Lemaire, Lady Iris, Dufour. But there had been another name, nearly forgotten in the noise. Delphine Roche, a student intern, quiet, bookish. She had worked under Vivien's guidance briefly, then disappeared when the boutique closed for mourning. No one had mentioned her since. Poirot retrieved her file. 19, studied chemistry at Cambridge. Top of her class, special interest in aromatic compound preservation. He picked up the sliver of glass again, and now it made sense. Delphine was staying in a rented flat off Bloomsbury. The building was old, with a smell of must and dust. Poirot knocked firmly. It took nearly a full minute before the door opened a crack. Delphine peered out. "Monsieur Poirot?" "Oui, may I come in?" She opened the door slowly. Inside was a clutter of notes, vials, flasks, and in the center, on a velvet cloth bottle, the amber bottle. Poirot walked toward it carefully. "So," he said softly, "you were the one who took it." Delphine looked down. "I didn't mean to steal. I preserved it." He picked up the bottle. It was heavier than it looked. Inside was a golden liquid that shimmered in the light. She called it Souvenir de Minuit, Delphine said, was her first scent, the one she never released. Poirot opened the stopper slightly and breathed in lilac, ambergris, and something darker, almost bitter. "A memory in a bottle," he murmured. "She made it for someone," Delphine said. "I found her letters. They were hidden in the back of the formula book." Poirot turned. Letters. Delphine handed him a bundle of yellowed paper. Poirot read slowly, eyebrows rising. The letters were addressed not to a lover, but to a sister, always wanted to be the beautiful one. I was content to be the clever one, but then you came back, wanting more, wanting to take what was mine. I bottled you into a memory and closed the door. There were more, but Poirot understood the meaning instantly. Odette had a sister, hidden from the world. She changed her name, Delphine whispered, but she worked there, right under her nose. Poirot felt a chill. Vivienne Dubois, not just an adopted protégée, but Odette's own sister. It all returned in fragments, the controlling nature, the obsession with being acknowledged, the deep, bitter rivalry disguised as affection. Vivienne hadn't killed Odette just to prove herself. She had done it to reclaim an identity that had been denied, to unstop her the Theo Attache bottle she had been sealed inside. That night, Poirot sat alone by his fire, the amber bottle resting before him. So many masks, he said aloud, even in the most elegant of places. George entered quietly. "Will you turn it in, sir?" The girl? "No," Poirot said softly. "Delphine is not guilty of theft. She preserved what others would have destroyed." He looked at the glowing liquid. "Souvenir de minuit," he whispered. "A memory of midnight, of endings and revelations." He corked it tightly and set it beside his clock. Some perfumes were never meant to be sold, only understood. Chapter 7. The Forgotten Scent. The discovery that Vivienne Dubois had been Odette's sister, her secret rival, had shifted Poirot's entire understanding of the case. What had at first seemed a tangled web of jealousy and ambition now revealed itself as something deeper. A long-buried sibling war, steeped in secrecy and betrayal. But one question still burned in Poirot's meticulous mind. Who sent the sliver of amber glass? It hadn't been Delphine. She had told him plainly. She hadn't contacted anyone, especially not him. She had feared being accused of theft, and hid away with the bottle and her silence. So, if not Delphine, who else knew enough to send that cryptic warning? Poirot sat in his flat that morning with his fingers templed, eyes narrowed, his usual morning routine forgotten. The gray sky beyond the window cast pale light on his desk. The sliver of glass caught the light, throwing golden flecks onto his notes. It was, he thought, as if the mystery itself refused to rest. He returned once more to the boutique. Renovations had begun in earnest. The elegant displays were shrouded in dust covers, and workmen moved back and forth, hammers and drills creating a harsh rhythm in what had once been a temple of quiet luxury. Poirot was greeted by none other than Marcel again. "Back, monsieur?" the manager asked, brushing dust from his sleeve. "Oui, to tie off a final thread." He walked past the front hall and into the old showroom. Marcel followed behind, puzzled. "I noticed something the first day I visited," Poirot said aloud. "Something out of place, but subtle. A missing bottle on a shelf. I had assumed Vivienne took it. But no, it had vanished before Odette's death." Marcel blinked. "What bottle?" "A tester version of Souvenir de Minuit. The only one Odette had ever let leave the vault briefly. The amber one, with the gold label that peeled. You're certain? Positive? And I now believe Odette herself gave it to someone. He turned sharply. To whom, Marcel? The manager froze. I don't know. Poirot watched him. Odette was generous but cautious. She gave away very little without reason. But perhaps someone she trusted. Someone who had been here long enough to earn her confidence. Someone who could move unseen. Marcel hesitated. There's only one person who fits that. He walked to the hallway and called out, Renee. From the back appeared a woman in her mid-50s, wearing a cleaning apron. She looked surprised to see Poirot. Ah, monsieur, I did not expect you. Madame Renee, Poirot said gently. Do you know why I'm here? She hesitated, wiping her hands on a cloth. No. Then allow me to explain. He stepped forward. You were the first to arrive the morning Odette died. Before Vivienne, before the police, and you said nothing was disturbed. She nodded. But there was a perfume bottle missing from the private collection. And later, that bottle, or its remains, was sent to me. Her lips parted slightly. Poirot went on. You knew what was happening, didn't you? You saw something before the death. Perhaps a quarrel, perhaps a hint of danger. Renee sighed. I saw her crying. Odette, the night before. I stayed late to clean, and she didn't know I was still there. She had the bottle in her hand. She said, even my memories are betraying me now. Then she locked the vault. Poirot stepped closer. And after she died, you took the broken bottle. No, I found a shard near the bin outside days later. I kept it because I thought it meant something, that someone had tried to destroy it. Poirot nodded slowly. And so you sent it to me. She looked down. You're Poirot. You find things. I thought you would understand. I do, he said softly. You saw something nobody else did. That her death wasn't only about ambition. It was about identity, legacy, memory. Later that day, Poirot returned to his flat, placing the second shot of amber glass next to the first. Together, they formed a corner of the once whole bottle. He sat back. Vivienne was in custody. Le Maire was under investigation. Lady Iris's career had crumbled. Dufour had turned state witness. Delphine was safe, and Renee had done her part. But the legacy of Odette Charpentier remained tangled. Poirot opened his notebook and wrote one final line. A scent once bottled cannot be unbottled without consequence. 2 weeks later, an invitation arrived, a modest black card with silver ink. La Maison du Bois, reopening gala. Below it a handwritten note. A fresh beginning, if such a thing is possible. We owe it to Odette, and ourselves. Marcel Poirot arrived at the boutique just as the evening glow kissed the building's facade. Inside, it had been transformed. The old glamour had returned, but with a modern polish. Photos of Odette lined the walls, elegant tributes to a complicated life. Guests mingled. Perfume lingered in the air, each note more delicate than the last. Delphine approached him, now working as a full-time chemist. They're naming a new line after her, she said. Not her scents, just her name, the spirit of her work. Poirot nodded. A living tribute, that is wise. She held up a small sample bottle. And this one, this is mine. He took it, uncorked the top gently, and breathed in soft spice, winter rose, and something warm beneath, like memory. "Very fine," he said. "You honor her well." Delphine smiled. "Thank you." Later, as Poirot stepped outside, he paused beneath the gaslight. He turned the small sample over in his palm. A new scent, a new story, yet behind him in the boutique, shadows of the past still lingered. Some scents are fleeting, others unforgettable, and some, like Odette Charpentier herself, become legend. Chapter 8. A whiff of smoke rain ticked gently against the windows of Whitehaven Mansions, casting a quiet rhythm over Hercule Poirot's morning. His breakfast sat half-eaten, the egg cooling, the toast untouched. A single envelope lay beside the teacup, recently delivered, and opened with unusual haste. Inside, a letter, unmarked, handwritten in crisp, mechanical style. "The scent may be silenced, but the flame still burns." The fire was no accident, no signature, no address. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he stared out at the grey London skyline. It had been a month since the boutique's reopening, since justice, of a sort, had found Vivienne Dubois, since Delphine Roche had stepped from the shadows to breathe new life into Odette Charpentier's forgotten legacy. But now, something else stirred, a whisper of fire. He made his way to the boutique that afternoon, unannounced. What he found stunned him. Charred walls, soot-stained shelves, shattered glass crunched beneath his shoes as he stepped through the blackened remains of what had once been the most elegant fragrance shop in London. "Poirot!" Marcel emerged from the back, his waistcoat dusted in ash. He looked exhausted, his face drawn. "You received the letter too?" Poirot asked, not unkindly. Marcel blinked. "Yes. Early this morning. I thought it was some cruel joke, but—" He gestured around at the destruction. Poirot studied the burn pattern. The fire had originated near the vault door, Odette's personal safe, and licked upward in long, unnatural strokes. "There was no lightning last night," Poirot noted, "and the electrical systems had just been redone." "Tell me, Marcel, what was kept in the vault since the reopening?" "Only copies," Marcel said. "Replicas of Odette's original bottles. The real ones were transferred to the Charpentier estate for archival. Except, Marcel hesitated. "There was one item. Delphine kept it for inspiration. Odette's original notebook. The one containing rough formulations, drawings, notes." Poirot turned sharply. "That is what they wanted." Delphine met him in a quiet tea-room off Kensington Square. Shaken but composed, she wore a grey coat and clutched her handbag tightly, as if it might slip through her fingers if she let go. "Everything's gone," she whispered. "All the replicas, the scents, her notes, her handwriting. I was foolish to leave it there." Poirot reached across the table gently. "You trusted people who had already been punished. You did not expect a shadow from outside the known circle." She looked up, her eyes glassy. "You think this wasn't Vivienne? She is still in prison?" "No, mademoiselle. This was someone else. Someone who knew of the notebook, who wanted it destroyed." "Why?" Poirot stirred his tea once, twice. "I suspect Odette wrote something in that notebook. Something someone feared would come to light." He returned home to examine his notes, and a name leapt out of the shadows of memory. Paul Dufour. The chemist, The one who'd been caught falsifying supply records for rare ingredients. The one Odette had dismissed quietly, months before her death. He had avoided the limelight during the murder investigation by cooperating early, feeding the police convenient truths about Vivian. And then he had vanished from the scene. Poirot placed a call. Inspector Japp, my good friend, we must talk about a man who prefers his secrets combusted. Dufour's flat was in Chelsea, too fine for his supposed unemployment. When Poirot and Japp arrived, the man opened the door with forced politeness. "Gentlemen," he said, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" Poirot stepped inside uninvited. "We are here because a fire has begun to burn in the ashes of a case we believed finished. Tell me, monsieur, have you been scenting the air of late?" Dufour's smile faded. "I don't know what you mean. You were dismissed by Odette, yes. But not before you tried to sell her unreleased formulas to rival firms in Milan. She discovered this and wrote it down." Dufour's eyes widened. "You see," Poirot went on, "Odette had the habit of documenting everything, especially betrayal. I didn't start that fire." Poirot held up her gloved hand. "I did not say you did. But someone else may have. Someone to whom you sold secrets. Someone who feared what that notebook might reveal. Perhaps they even suggested the fire themselves." Dufour said nothing. Japp stepped forward. "We'll need a full statement, Dufour, and your travel records, now." As Japp cuffed him, Poirot turned to the mantel and noticed an envelope identical to the one he had received. Another warning, from the same sender. But this time, it bore a faint trace of cologne. A subtle spice, with a tobacco undertone. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot worked through the night. The clue from the cologne led him to an unexpected direction. A defunct perfume label, once backed by an obscure French industrialist, Etienne Mohand. A name that had appeared faintly in Odette's early business notes. He had once offered to buy her entire company. She had refused. Morand was never heard from again. Until now. The following morning Poirot traveled to an address in Knightsbridge. It was discreet. An office posing as a men's tailoring service. Inside, a man waited, Etienne Mohand. Older now, silver-haired, but with eyes like cut glass. "Monsieur Poirot," he said smoothly, "to what do I owe this intrusion?" "To a fire, monsieur, and a scent." Mohand gave the barest flicker of recognition. "You have nothing on me." "Not yet, but I suspect the authorities will find Dufour's recent payments trace back to an account of yours. That fire at the boutique, was that your doing too?" Mohand smiled thinly. "An accident. How unfortunate." Poirot leaned forward. "She denied you once. She humiliated you. And now that her work is being resurrected, you strike again. You cannot kill a legend, monsieur. It only lingers longer." Mohand's smile did not falter. "And what will you do, detective? Arrest me for smoke?" "No," Poirot said, standing. "But smoke always leads to fire, and fire to ash. And in ash, we find the truth." That evening Poirot returned home, to a new letter on his desk. This one wasn't threatening, just a single phrase. "The scent of truth is hardest to bottle." It was unsigned, but he knew the hand, Delphine. She had begun rewriting the lost notes from memory. preserving what could be salvaged. Morin might evade justice for now, but his sabotage had failed. Odette's secrets were being reborn, not as weapons, but as legacy. In the corner of Poirot's sitting room, 2 shards of amber glass rested beneath a bell jar. Together, they formed only a fragment of the whole. But to Poirot, they told a complete story of memory, of ambition, of scent and shadow, of a woman who bottled her brilliance, and those who tried to steal it, and of those who would always remember. Chapter 9. Essence of the unseen night fell with quiet purpose, casting long shadows across London's lamplit streets. In his sitting room at Whitehaven Mansions, Hercule Poirot turned a glass phial over in his fingers. It was Delphine's most recent attempt to replicate her mentor's long-lost formula. Odette Charpentier's final scent, Souvenir de Minuit. The scent hovered in the room, a fragile thing, part ghost, part memory. And yet, something about it nagged at him. It wasn't just a perfume anymore. It was a puzzle, a cipher in scent. He raised it to his nose again, closed his eyes. There it was, notes of iris and cardamom, traces of labdanum, and a curious edge, sharp, metallic. Poirot opened his eyes. "Mais oui," he whispered. It was not a mistake in the formula, it was a message. The next morning he returned to the now ruined boutique. Despite the charred remains, the front was being cleared and dusted. Marcel was overseeing the cleanup, sleeves rolled, brow furrowed. "Still fighting the ashes, monsieur?" Poirot greeted him. Marcel glanced up. "There's little else to do." Poirot stepped inside, gesturing toward the ruined vault. Where did Delphine sit when she worked on her recreations? Marcel pointed to a scorched desk in the back office. Poirot crossed to it, running a gloved hand across the soot-covered wood. Something felt off. He knelt and opened the lower drawer. Inside was a set of small vials, mostly melted or cracked, except one, a slender glass tube sealed with wax. It was miraculously untouched. He lifted it carefully. "No label," Marcel noted. "We thought it was just another test vial." Poirot held it to the light. Inside, the liquid was slightly thicker, darker than perfume should be. "Because it is not perfume," Poirot murmured. He turned to Marcel, his eyes sharp. "This is ink." Hours later, in his apartment, Poirot uncorked the vial and poured a few drops onto white parchment. He waited. Gradually, faint lines appeared, handwriting blooming from invisible strokes. Odette's script. Not a formula, but a letter. "To Delphine. If they come for me, know this. I was not afraid. The true danger lies not in those who crave my crown, but in those who crave what I never gave them. Protect the formula, yes, but more than that, protect the truth behind it, for it is not merely a scent but a record. The real blend was never meant for shelves. It is a history, and in the wrong hands, it becomes power." Poirot read it 3 times, slowly. A record? Of what? Delphine arrived that afternoon. Poirot showed her the invisible ink letter. She read it in silence, then sat down heavily in the armchair. "She never told me," she said, "that it was more than perfume." Poirot leaned forward. "What is it? Try to bottle?" Delphine frowned, thinking. She always said the senses carried memory, that she could distill entire places, entire events into a single scent. "But I thought it was artistic metaphor." Poirot stirred and paced. No, mademoiselle, it was literal. Odette encoded her life, the betrayals, the secrets, perhaps even crimes into scent. The final formula wasn't merely a fragrance. It was a confession. That night, Poirot took the original sample of Souvenir de Minuit, a few drops recovered from a bottle found in the vault's wreckage, and brought it to a private lab. The chemist, an old acquaintance, analyzed it meticulously. The results startled even Poirot. It contains pyridine, the chemist noted, in very small, safe amounts, but you'd never find it in perfume. It's a chemical often used in ink processing, and it gives off a faint metallic scent. Poirot nodded slowly. Hidden messages? Hidden in plain smell. It wasn't just artistry, it was espionage. Early the next morning, a letter arrived by courier, unsigned, typed, the same paper stock as the others. But this time, it contained coordinates, a location, not a challenge, an invitation. The coordinates led Poirot and Inspector Japp to an old industrial greenhouse outside London, long abandoned, tucked into overgrown countryside. Inside, vines snaked up shattered glass walls, and the air was thick with damp earth. Near the center was a large wooden table, covered in bottles, papers, dried petals, and seated behind it, a man with silver hair and an expression of complete calm, Etienne Morin. "You came," he said simply. Poirot took one step forward. "Why here?" Morin spread his hands. This was where Odette first tested her original formulas. It was her sanctuary. She never told anyone, but I listened. I knew. Japp raised an eyebrow. "You've been here all along?" "No," Morand replied. "Only since the fire. I came to retrieve what remains, what she never gave me." Poirot narrowed his eyes. "And what is that?" Morand smiled faintly. "The truth, locked in scent." Odette recorded more than her own secrets. She was a silent archivist of others, royal affairs, blackmail, industrial theft. She preserved them in her scents, coded them, smelled them into being. Poirot folded his arms. "You burned the boutique to erase one scent. But how many more remain?" Morand's face twitched. "Too many. And now," Japp asked, "what do you plan to do?" Morand's voice turned cold. "I plan to finish what she started, before someone else does." Japp stepped forward. "Enough riddles, you're under arrest." "No." Poirot held up a hand. "Let him go." Japp stared. "Have you lost your mind?" Poirot's eyes never left Morand. "He is not the enemy now. He is merely a witness to history. And history is already unraveling." Back in London, Poirot compiled everything. Letters, samples, notes, and placed them in a locked case, which he delivered to the British Museum under seal. Delphine stood beside him as the case was accepted. "What will they do with it?" she asked. "Study it, protect it. Perhaps never fully understand it." Delphine nodded, then smiled. "And the new line? Do we still go on?" Poirot gave a small nod. "With care, and with truth." She handed him a new bottle, a reinvention of Souvenir de Minuit. No secrets, no coded past, just scent. Pure, honest, bomb-free. That evening Poirot sat by his window, watching the city blur beneath soft rain. The bell jar on his shelf still held the amber shards of the first bottle. He lifted the new perfume sample to his nose and closed his eyes. No ink, no pyridine, just notes of lavender, smoke, and citrus. The present, not the past. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. Chapter 10. The Final Note. The days that followed were marked by calm. A strange, almost uneasy calm. The kind that settles only after a great storm has passed and Bun is left surveying the damage, the secrets uprooted, and the silence that follows the final note of a long-forgotten melody. Hercule Poirot took solace in routine. His morning eggs, his carefully waxed moustache, the slow, deliberate polishing of his patent leather shoes. These things reminded him that while human nature may twist and tangle itself in the most devious knots, life could still be unknotted with patience and the proper technique. And yet, a final thread still nagged at his mind. Delphine Roche had reopened the boutique, not on Bond Street this time, but in a quiet corner of Mayfair, under a new name, Atelier Charpentier. There were no velvet ropes, no theatrical displays, just warm wooden shelves, simple glass flacons, and a single photograph of Odette, smiling beneath a canopy of jasmine. Poirot visited her on the boutique's opening morning. "Have you slept?" he asked, peering over his pince-nez glasses. Delphine smiled. "I think I've aged 5 years in 2 months, but yes, last night I finally did." She handed him a bottle. Privé. Awakening. The scent was gentle, green tea, lemon verbena, a touch of bergamot. No secrets, just serenity. "You chose peace," Poirot said softly. "I chose to begin again," she replied. Poirot set the bottle down. "And yet, one piece of the puzzle remains." Delphine tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Poirot's brow furrowed. "The perfume bottle, the one that broke in the boutique, whose shattered pieces we found. Do you recall where it was kept before the fire?" "In the vault," she said, "near the notes and the original formulas." He nodded slowly. "Oui. But Odette's letter, the one written in invisible ink, mentions a history. Not her history, but that of others, a network, betrayals, blackmail." Delphine swallowed. "Yes, she created a scent, as a ledger. But who was it for?" Later that afternoon, Poirot sat once more with Inspector Japp in Scotland Yard. "You want to what?" Japp asked, incredulous. "Re-examine the Charpentier ledger," Poirot replied calmly. "Odette was clever, mon ami. But she would not have written all she knew into her bottle. She was a meticulous woman. She kept paper backups, quiet ones, hidden." Japp sighed. "We've already combed through everything." "No," Poirot said, tapping a finger. "You combed through the obvious. I want access to her travel records, her correspondence, especially the years just before she dismissed Paul Dufour." Japp groaned. "Very well. But if you find nothing, you're buying lunch." He didn't have to buy lunch. 3 days later, a letter surfaced, buried deep in a forgotten customs folder. A parcel Odette had sent to a convent in Belgium. Inside it, a hand-bound book. Small, slim, sealed with wax. Poirot had it opened under strict supervision. It was written in Odette's hand. Pages and pages of coded recipes, but also names. Dozens of them. Names of aristocrats, diplomats, actresses, and scientists. All people she had met during her years at elite events. Each entry bore the same chilling format: name, date, Event, scent, profile, compromising secret. Jap skimmed 1. Lord Sherrington, December 1947. Notes of bay rum saffron. Observed meeting a Russian attaché under false pretenses. He whistled. This isn't a perfume journal, it's a spy ledger. Poirot nodded grimly. She must have been approached. Perhaps by intelligence services, perhaps by enemies. But she chose a neutral path. To observe and record. Not to weaponize, but to preserve. And in doing so, she made herself dangerous. Jap shook his head. No wonder someone tried to erase it all. That evening, Poirot met Delphine once more. This time in the quiet garden behind the new boutique. He handed her a copy of the decoded ledger. She stared at it, then closed it slowly. I knew she kept journals, but not like this. Poirot leaned forward. Odette walked a delicate line. She never used what she knew, but she kept the knowledge safe, perhaps in the hope that one day someone would know how to use it wisely, or destroy it if needed. Delphine hesitated. What would you do? Poirot smiled faintly. I would leave it to you. You are her heir, in blood, in craft, in conscience. She looked out over the garden, then nodded. I will burn it, not out of fear, but respect. The fire was small, private, a brazier behind the boutique, beneath a waning moon. Delphine placed each page in carefully, watching it curl and vanish. No one spoke. Poirot simply watched the ashes rise. The secrets were gone, or rather, finally put to rest. The next day Poirot received a letter, this one handwritten, perfumed with Reveille. Monsieur Poirot, the boutique will continue, but it's something new. No more secrets, no more shadows, just scent, as it was meant to be. Thank you for seeing the truth not only in Odette's death, but in her life. Yours, Delphine. Weeks passed. Poirot sat by the fireplace, sipping hot chocolate, rereading an old detective novel that bored him for being too straightforward. The world he had come to understand was never that simple. A knock at the door. A young courier handed him a parcel, wrapped in simple white linen. No note, no return address. Inside, a perfume bottle. Elegant. Amber glass. A silver stopper. The name etched on the label. Souvenir de minuit. L'adieu, the farewell. He uncorked it and inhaled. Lavender. Vanilla. Jasmine. And beneath it all, a whisper of smoke. A final tribute, not a message, not a warning, a goodbye. As Poirot set the bottle down, he allowed himself a rare moment of contentment. Odette Charpentier had not simply created perfumes. She had captured time, memory, danger, and legacy. And now, her story was complete, neatly bottled, properly sealed, with just the right amount of flair.